You are listening to the Artwonk Podcast, a show where we take a deep dive into what it takes to be successful in marketing if you are a visual artist or craftsperson. We will explore how the art world works as well as how to better achieve your professional goals. I am Neville Parker, your host and resident Artwonk. So settle in and join me as we get today's show underway. Hey everyone, this is episode 6 of our podcast series called The Art Strata, where we explore the art world and all the layers of engagement available. Yay! Hi everyone, and welcome into episode 6. You know, I've just finished having a good listen back to 5, and I realized that there have been times where I've talked about levels of the art community or how galleries filter and how feeder galleries exist. And I appreciate that some people who haven't worked extensively within the art community might not have a full understanding of just how the stratas work and where they intersect and what the barriers within each level are. So I thought maybe this would be an opportunity just to sort of clarify how I see it. I'm sure that people standing in different locations in the world with different points of view as to what opportunities are in their communities will see some other variables. But as an overview, how does the art world look? And how does it work? Why do people manage to get to that rock star status sort of at the very top of the pyramid? And why do others end up as part of the very, very broad base of the pyramid? And, you know, how does it work? So in essence, very few people who are practitioners of art, who are makers at the moment, get to the top. I mean, that's pretty much the same with the music industry or anything where it's sporting. The elite are a very small group. Now, that doesn't mean that they have any more value, but it does mean they have an awful lot more visibility. And unfortunately, within the art world, because of the way our costing structure works, it generally means that they will be the big earners as well. But not always. Turns out an awful lot of artists who make it into that top echelon only start really selling when they're dead. So just aiming for the top isn't the best career path if you consider that the way to achieve true stardom means you can't spend your paycheck. So how does it go? Well, if we start at the top with international recognition, you've got your art fairs like the Biennales, auctions, international art auctions and collections like the big galleries in the world and museums, but also some of the larger private collections. When you make it into that echelon, you've had to have already gone through a number of national filters to get there as a rule. And our national filters are pretty similar. We have art fairs, we have auctions, and we have collectors as well within our structure. But we also have, and in some countries we call them museums, who collect and who become part of the reservoir of social commentary. They collect art not for money, but often because the artist is deemed to have been in some way a pivotal person within part of the social structure of the time. We also have galleries of note within our main centres, primarily within the main centres. And if I look at New Zealand, you know, Wellington, Christchurch, Auckland, Dunedin, we have dealer galleries in those areas that are known well enough throughout the country for the people that they represent, that they also become part of the feeder system into the national galleries. If you're not represented in one of the top dealer galleries, then there's a pretty good chance you won't get into a national collection. The regional galleries are wonderful, wonderful points where they both show work from around the country, but also help to profile the local artist at that top level. Their filter is not always one to do with marketability, but they're curated shows, and as such, if the right curators are doing their jobs the right way, they are presenting works that the other national galleries will take notice of, or regional galleries, and so you climb up. Then we have within our smaller centres dealer galleries, artist-led spaces, collectives. There's art shops. There's shows still and fairs and weekend type events. And then you have cafe walls, things like that. So in the physical structure, there's lots of ways that you can be seen and that you can get to market. But each of them have different stratas of market attached. And by that I mean they have different engagement with the viewers and different price points. And we shouldn't forget now in this day and age, online. There are online galleries, websites, social media platforms. There are lots of ways for artists to be seen. But it saddens me to see how many artists have a tendency to believe that visibility is what it's all about. Yes, it's true you cannot sell a secret. You must show people what you do. But it is erroneous in the extreme if you think that just by having your work in front of people, they're going to want to buy it. The crazy part of the whole deal is that a lot of the value systems that the art world works on, as I said in the last podcast episode, is really based on guilt by association. If you look at a painting as being pigment smeared on some form of surface and arranged in a pleasing way or not so pleasing way for the eye, there's not much value there. A couple of bucks worth of fabric, a few extra dollars worth of pigment, and some effort. It's just not going to really sum up. You do not get value from the sum of the costs involved. It's a whole lot of other things, intrinsic things that get attached to this process that actually offer value. And the value is normally based around the company that the work is shown in. And this is why online selling can be incredibly hard. If you think of a gallery in my town where we service roughly 60,000 people for our region, the competition for attention when somebody walks into my gallery, one of the artists in there who has one piece, assuming everyone has one piece in there, you have got that person's attention split. Really, you're competing with 28 different options. Now, 1 in 28, you got a chance in a mindset of the viewer to be seen, because not all those things are going to be equitable or comparable, and so people can see your work clearly. When you end up online, you're competing with millions of people, and that makes it really hard, really, really hard to be found, really hard to be seen, in terms of not just found, but have them spend time going through your website. The average millennial was the piece I read, so there's a whole lot of gens attached now that are even better, has an attention span of roughly 2 seconds on a website. The young ones coming through now, if they're under 17, 0.3 of a second. They literally, when it first flashes up, they make up their mind whether they're going to explore further. So online's a very hard place to make your value statements work. So how do the different ones interconnect, and why is there value differences? I've used this analogy before with friends of family. If I was to invite you to come to dinner at our place because we've got an old lady coming around, we're going to have meat and vegetables for dinner, you might say, thanks very much, but I'm busy. But if it turned out that old lady was the queen, then the fact that we're having dinner with the queen and it's meat and vegetables suddenly changes the value of that invitation. Now, that really is the way the art world as a whole works. Each layer of engagement gives a different value structure. Whether it's a perceived filter that you're looking at and you believe that the people who control that space have knowledge that you don't have, and if they've made a selection, then that adds value. Or if it's an experience that has meant something special to you because it's a rare experience, it all adds value. An example could be if you showed up on an auction list alongside a Picasso, then others would assume that you have a similar value to Picasso. And from that point on, that work, whether or not it is good or bad, is totally immaterial. It is now valued in a similar company to Picasso's. So once things take value, it's not common for artworks to lose their value. And that's why the investment market can be quite complicated. So let's have a look at how that works starting at the bottom. Cafe walls, etc. So if you're somebody who thinks you just have to get your work out there, I need to have it seen, and you don't think about the company you're keeping, you're likely to have some problems. Because, simply put, if I want to put my artwork where people have money, then maybe I should put it in the bank. Well, that's really good logic until you start looking at why are people in the bank? For the same reason they're in cafes. They're there for the business transaction that they went in to do. Yes, occasionally they will see your work and be so moved by the passion, the joy, and the wonderful expertise of your work that they wish to own it, but it's rare. Primarily there to get a coffee and a scone, or they're there to make a deposit or a withdrawal or to argue with the manager about an overdraft or whatever their business is. But their business is not there to buy art. So it's not the best way to get yourself established as an artist. It is, however, really pleasing to make those spaces look good. And you'll continue to see cafes and the likes offering space to artists because it's the cheapest way in the world for them to actually show their punters that they care about making the space interesting without them having to spend a damn dollar. I don't mean to be unkind towards cafe dealers, but I've often found them to be people who don't understand art, but they do understand selling coffee. Shows and fairs. Shows and fairs are wonderful ways of getting your work out, especially if you're not looking at a full-time business opportunity and growing a price point, because shows and fairs have a tendency to have ceilings. All businesses do. A ceiling is a price expectation that you just cannot push above because the company that you keep, you're always being undercut by them. And the trouble with a show or a fair is you cannot choose your company. And as so, if you show up to a weekend show or an art fair, and there's somebody in the corner who's selling something similar to you at 50% less than you are, then you're competing in that space with each other, and the people who have come are going to buy, but unless you have something exemplary about what you are, it becomes a price-driven equation, and it's hard to overcome price-driven stimulus when it's in that type of environment. Art shops, what's an art shop? So an art shop is actually somebody who sells a whole lot of products that includes art. So their core business might be tourist tea towels and other things, but they also have art. They can be very good if you're looking at a transient market. You can produce similar things over and over again because you've got people moving through. You're not necessarily dealing with a local populace who are going to see the same thing over and over again and lose interest, and can be quite a good outlet for just a transactional type of creative, but not, generally speaking, any way of building prominence within your art community. Collectives and artist-run spaces, they offer a little bit more. There is a support network, the chance to learn the business from each other. There is often people at different levels of their expertise. So you will have a more established artist alongside an emerging artist, and that can help draw some notoriety to your work and give you a chance to establish a pricing structure. The price, generally speaking, is always set by the market, what people are prepared to pay. And bear in mind, people are prepared to pay for excellence and for individuality and for uniqueness, but they also pay for prestige, and they pay for bragging rights, they pay for emotional satisfaction, they pay for lots of things. A Gucci handbag is just a handbag without the Gucci label on it. I don't even know if I'm saying Gucci, whatever it is. See, I'm not their consumer market, so it doesn't matter how much they spend on their marketing and their advertising, wasted on me. So same type of thing here. The people who are not interested in art are not going to get the value system the same way, But if you're in a collective or an artist-led space, you will get support and you will develop a sense of how the market's evolving around you. Dealer galleries are probably the most accessible way to establish a price structure and establish some notoriety. Galleries will represent different level artists and will have different market structures so that you can find one that you may fit into, but also one that talks to your aspirations. Just like buying the worst house on the best street, if you're wanting to increase your value, you're probably best to look at a gallery that's right on the edge of your skill base and really work hard to get into it, because they're going to grow your price expectation by the people that they already represent, and they're going to grow your business presence in terms of teaching you how better to deal with the demands and the expectations of the higher price points. And that will lead you into a better position when it comes to being recognized by the next level of collector and dealer. Regional galleries, traditionally they have been focused on showing works without worrying about making sales, but in the present funding structure within New Zealand at least, we're seeing more and more of the regional galleries starting to dabble in sales shows, something I personally have no time for and think that there's just, it to me is the most incongruous and outright bloody stupid idea I've come across. A gallery that's funded by ratepayers and by grants, that's actually forced to supplement their income by sales, will be staffed by people who understand curating shows that are about making statements, not about making sales, while at the same time muddying the water for a dealer gallery that relies solely on a financial transaction and has no access to funding. Little bit of a private dig. Anyway, and from there we move up to galleries of note in the main centres. So they're a regional dealer gallery, but they start to be the ones that actually really make a difference when it comes to that upper echelon of artists of note. So more often than not representing contemporary artists, they tend to foster the older, more established art groupings, and they have connections into your corporate collections and very different marketing structures to the smaller dealer galleries. Much more complicated business models that they work with, and very often once you get into a gallery like that, you talk to a process that's similar to the old days where you may well be stabled for some time without much exposure, but over time you get a much better return for your effort if you can get the attention of these galleries and are making something of note. Your national galleries and museums, generally speaking, if you haven't been through a main centre dealer gallery or a dealer gallery of note, it's almost impossible to get noticed by these guys, because again, there are so many people making a lot of noise and the filters are on by everyone trying to get the background noise out. As above with the others, you get into your national recognition through also having collectors and auction houses represent you or your works. And when you get part of an important art sale as a title for an auction, it just denotes that you're important and helps to add value. The art fairs, the big global art fairs and biennales and the likes, are not, generally speaking, representative of commercial arts. A lot of them are idea festivals, and they are wonderfully dynamic and exciting for artists and the viewer alike, but they don't really denote a market plan as such for most, because generally speaking these are run by grants, and the grant process involves having to constantly go back to that trough with something new and unusual, so it's less and less connected with the everyday marketplace. So that's how the art market sort of runs in strata. If you're at the moment involved in something like an online gallery and you're selling through your website and you're wishing to make a connection with your local community and you're wishing to maybe identify a price point, then finding a gallery that has work similar to yours, and this is where you have to be really honest with yourself. It has to be really comparable. Similar scales, similar compositional values, similar skill level. Then the gallery is adding the value on top of that, but it will give you a point where the market expectation sits for your community. Where it gets really hard is if you're selling, you're sitting in Nelson, New Zealand, and you're selling online. You can't see what the person who's looking at your work in Prague, the person who's looking at your work in Honolulu, or the person who's looking at your work in Sydney is comparing you with. So your pricing structure can be really out of link or out of step with what's happening in their environment. And we all have built-in bullshit meters which tell us that something doesn't feel right. And we use that often to work out our pricing expectations. And what this can truly mean as a problem for a maker is you can have a really good value piece, but if the value doesn't equate to the local environment, people will pull back from buying. So, we look at all these things, and when you pick where you stand now as your baseline and where you want to get to, there are stratas that you will be able to now target and work through. The art world is not complicated. It is a little convoluted because there's a lot of crossover, but it's not complicated. We have people who make things and people who want to own things or possess them. And we have people who take pleasure in sharing that process with others. So, whether it's a big gallery, a small gallery, a shoe shop that shows your work, it doesn't really matter where you are as long as you're happy with the company you're keeping. And if you wish to grow a price or grow your presence within your peer group, then you start looking to the next spaces up. So there you have it. That's how I see the art world from where I stand. Be really curious if you see it differently. Please let us know, either by sending us an email, or if you want, use the comments button if you're using the Anchor app to listen to this podcast. I look forward to the next show. Hi everyone, it's Neville here again. Hey, just before I go, I want to remind you that we now have a new email address. It's info@theartwonk.com, and also the artwonk.com is our website, which we're in the process of getting set up with show notes and follow-up from the shows. So please get in contact with us if you have any questions or feedback, especially if you feel that I glossed over something that's of importance to you. Really would enjoy having that connection with you as somebody who's trying to be a creative in today's environment, and let me know if there's stuff that I'm missing out or stuff you'd like to know. So now I'm off to my studio. Happy creating!